to start my talk by saying there are very little things, or very few things, that we as individuals with Parkinson's or without Parkinson's can control in our lives, right? So we cannot control how long the levodopa stays in our system. We cannot control what the weather conditions are outside. However, there are two things that we can always control. One of them is how much you move. So fitness, as Dr. Mills had explained before, the fitness has shown to be a disease-modifying therapy. So in partnership, what we put into our bodies is also what we can control. So these are two things that I feel should empower you all to feel that you have control over. So my talk is called Food for the Brain, Nutrition and Parkinson's Disease. So objectives, I can actually just stand here. I want to define nutrition, identify some nutritional concerns for those with Parkinson's disease. I want to talk about some popular diets and some research behind those, as well as highlight some evidence-based findings that might help reduce the rate of Parkinson's disease progression. So what exactly is nutrition? So nutrition is the intake of food considered in relation to the body's dietary needs. So my nutritional needs look a lot different than my grandfather's needs, or my, let's say, my unborn nephew's needs will be when he is born. So this is very individualized. So one size does not fit all when it comes to nutrition. So some nutritional concerns for those living with Parkinson's disease. Bone thinning. So strong bones can keep people living with Parkinson's safer when they experience those unexpected falls. So mobility challenges can become more common as Parkinson's disease progresses, including an increased risk of falls. So what are the two things that we always tell patients with Parkinson's? Don't choke and don't fall. Studies show that Parkinson's can also increase the risk for bone thinning. This combination can lead to injury. Seems like common sense, right? If you're more prone to falling and your bones are thinner, you're more than likely going to experience some sort of break. So the current recommendation to alleviate some of those concerns for bone thinning, we want to eat meals rich in bone strengthening nutrients, such as calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, and vitamin K. Regular exposure to sunlight also increases your vitamin D. So it's not just to get yourself nice and bronzed, it's to actually strengthen those bones. In addition to the right foods, walking and other weight-bearing exercises keep bones strong, making fractures or breaks less likely. Does that make sense? Dehydration. How many of you experience dehydration? Okay, I do myself. So Parkinson's medications can raise dehydration risk, which can lead to confusion, weakness, balance problems, respiratory failure, kidney problems, and extreme cases, death. So dehydration can also lead to low blood pressure or those fluctuations in blood pressure. So what do we do to alleviate dehydration? One of the things that I have found is that you can go online and type in recommendations for water. And sometimes you'll get a very lengthy equation to put in your body weight in kilograms and so on and so forth. But I like to keep it very simple. If you can remember to drink 8 8-ounce glasses of water each day, you're at a good start. Okay, so does anybody have suggestions as to how we can accommodate or how we can achieve those 8 ounces a day? Yes, in the back.
Get a BOGO bottle from Bed Bath & Beyond. It's already marked on it. It's in there and you can see your progression.
Love it. Anybody else? Yes, Nancy.
4 times a day when I take my medicine, I take 8 ounces. I never take anything but water.
All right, so with medication, you're taking water.
I'm halfway there.
All right, there we go. Anybody else? Okay, so those are 2 really good recommendations. one of the things that I really like to do, or what I've done to up my water intake, is I went and I bought one of those hydro flasks, and unfortunately today I don't have it with me because I knew that there would be water, but normally every day I refill my hydro flask at least 3 or 4 times. It is now my purse. I do not carry a purse. I carry a water bottle instead. Constipation. I'm sure that that's a big one. I won't make you raise your hand to tell me who of you experienced this. But Parkinson's disease can lead to the slow of the movement of the colon, which is causing that constipation. Unresolved constipation can lead to bowel impaction. So essentially this is when a mass of dry, hard feces becomes almost impossible to pass normally. So this can require some hospitalization and even surgery in some extreme cases. So how do we alleviate this issue of constipation? Current recommendations is that you should have, if you have less than 1 bowel movement per day, we want you to up that fluid intake. So it kind of piggybacks off of the water intake. You want to make sure that you're drinking a lot of fluids. You want to consume more fiber. And where is fiber found? Fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Another thing, we want to aim for 30 to 40 grams of fiber per day. So one of the things that I like to tell people is when they go to the grocery store and you're looking at the boxes, flip over that cereal, because again, one size does not fit all. If you look at something like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, flip it over to that nutrition label and you scroll down to the dietary fiber, there's probably 1 gram of fiber. However, if you were to look at a box of Fiber 1, scroll down to the same dietary fiber, it is probably 10 grams of fiber. I would opt for the Fiber 1. Choose foods that have 5 or more grams of fiber per serving. Okay, so you want to get the most bang for your buck. Unexpected weight loss. I've presented this probably 3 or 4 times, and each one of my groups, at least one person has raised their hand and expressed that they have had unexpected weight loss. So unexpected weight loss is pretty much something that you cannot attribute to some change in your diet. So you're not eating differently, you're not eating different foods, you're not eating less. So that is something that we want to keep in the back of our mind that could be a concern. So difficulty swallowing, feeling full or bloated, and improper fitting partial dentures could be potential causes of this unexpected weight loss. So what do we recommend? So we want to eat smaller, more frequent meals. I know a number of patients have expressed that they spend a decent amount of time eating lunch, sometimes an hour and a half. And if we can reduce that meal size, maybe we can also decrease that time that's spent eating lunch. Kind of piggybacking off of the fact that I said that you might experience unexpected weight loss for no reason other than, you're not changing your diet again, you're not changing the timing of the food or the amount. You might want to have that red flag light bulb that goes off in your head that says, I might need to talk to my neurologist and talk to him about this H. pylori bug. So H. pylori is a GI bug that basically affects the absorption of your PD medications and consequently affects your overall response to treatment. So H. pylori can be tested by a stool sample. It is, I wouldn't say it's common, but I wouldn't say it's uncommon. So if you do experience those unexpected weight loss, I would again, just talk to your doctor. Okay, so moving on to the role of nutrition. So the current state of knowledge about the role of nutrients and diet as it relates to Parkinson's is very limited. However, researchers have seen a correlation between diet and the management of other neurological conditions such as epilepsy, dementia, and stroke. So while no single ingredient exists to magically cure neurological conditions, several well-studied diet plans have been associated with a positive effect on the brain. So we're going to go into 5 of them. And essentially what I wanted to do was I wanted to pull from the research the findings. So what were these diets finding? So we're going to take a closer look, as I said, at 5 diets. We're going to start with a Mediterranean diet, moving into the ketogenic, then to the mind, intermittent fasting, and finishing with the FEINGOLD diet. If any of you have heard of the FEINGOLD diet, you get a gold star. The Mediterranean diet. Okay, so the emphasis here is eating primarily plant-based foods, such as fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and nuts. We're replacing butter with healthy fats, such as olive oil and canola oil. We're going to use herbs and spices instead of salt to flavor our foods. And we're going to limit our red meat intake to no more than a few times a month. So what is the research saying about the Mediterranean diet? In 2012, a study was published in the Movement Disorders Journal suggesting that a lower adherence to the Mediterranean diet is associated with Parkinson's disease status. So in other words, if you followed a Mediterranean diet, it may both lower the risk for Parkinson's disease or push back the age of onset. The thought is that these antioxidants like vitamin C, vitamin E, and carotenoid are found in high concentrations in these foods that are associated with the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet also reduces inflammation. And I don't know about you, but I found out recently that the reason why we floss isn't necessarily to get the stuff out of our teeth. It reduces the inflammation in our mouth. And as we reduce the inflammation in our mouth, it thus then reduces inflammation throughout the body. So the less inflamed we are, the less likely we are to get sick. In addition, the Mediterranean diet adherence may be protective because of a lower consumption of compounds which are associated with a higher risk of Parkinson's. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the keto diet, how many here have heard of that? It's pretty big, pretty popular more recently, I would say. So the keto diet is very low carb, very high fat. So about 75% of our diet is going to come from healthy fats, stressing healthy. And so about 20% of our diet is going to be coming from protein, and the carbs that we do get are going to pretty much be coming from your vegetables, or your vegetables. So some of the foods that the ketogenic diet includes are meat, fatty fish, eggs, butter and cream, cheese, so not all cheese is created equal. We're going to stress unprocessed cheese, so cheddar, goat cheese, cream, blue or mozzarella. Nuts and seeds, healthy oils, avocados, low-carb veggies, and condiments. So what is the research saying about this? So this study was actually the only study, or only diet, that was studied in Parkinson's disease. So what they did in 2018, they basically took two groups they separated individuals into two groups. One followed a low-fat diet, and one followed a ketogenic diet. While both diet groups significantly improved in motor and non-motor symptoms, the ketogenic group showed greater improvements in non-motor symptoms. So these non-motor symptoms included depression, urinary problems, fatigue, daytime sleepiness, cognitive impairment, and others. Adverse effects were mild. In the ketogenic group, the most common or the worst adverse effect was exacerbated tremor and or rigidity. So just as a caveat, I have experimented with the ketogenic diet. I don't follow it anymore. I actually need carbs. But I do have to say that I did experience that mental clarity, especially in the afternoon. I didn't feel like I needed that second or third cup of coffee. I did feel a little bit more mentally sharp. And, I wouldn't say that I am a proponent or a strong supporter of the ketogenic diet. That's just my personal experience. The MIND diet. So the MIND diet is a mix of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, which was specifically created to stop hypertension. However, the MIND diet was tweaked specifically to address cognitive decline. So the MIND diet focuses on 10 brain-healthy food groups, chicken, fish, green leafy vegetables, other vegetables, berries, nuts, olive oil, wine, beans, and whole grains. So what does the research say about the MIND diet? So the MIND diet has not been exclusively studied in Parkinson's disease. However, promising results have been found in Alzheimer's disease. In 2015, a study published in the Alzheimer's and Dementia showed that adults who followed the MIND diet rigorously had a 53% reduction in the rate of Alzheimer's disease compared to those who followed it the least. I don't know about you, but 53% seems pretty significant to me. Those who followed the MIND diet moderately, so probably followed the 80-20 lifestyle where they're pretty consistent during the week, maybe let themselves go a little on the weekend, showed a 35% reduction. Again, I also think that that is pretty significant. Results were independent of other lifestyle changes, meaning they didn't exercise more, they didn't report better sleep, so this was solely based on the food that they were eating. So this suggests that the MIND diet might also have preventative and disease reduction benefits for other diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and hypertension. I don't know about you, but I've also heard or noticed that people with Parkinson's disease oftentimes don't just have Parkinson's. So we're often treating multiple diseases. The FEINGOLD diet. Who gets the gold star? Has anybody heard of this diet? Yeah? All right, you get the gold star. So the FEINGOLD diet I thought was pretty interesting. It's an elimination diet that pretty much helps you figure out if you have certain additives or artificial sweeteners are triggering some sort of sensitivity. When I presented this a while ago, I had a woman raise her hand who said that she could not stay at her Christmas dinner because she couldn't stand the smell of the vanilla candle. Now, I don't know if it's just that she didn't like the vanilla candle or if it was really irritating her Parkinson's symptoms, but she did say that she was experiencing more tremor than she normally does. So the list of off-limit foods and ingredients in the FEINGOLD diet include artificial food colors, dyes, and flavors, artificial fragrances in foods, air fresheners or lotions, artificial sweeteners, which those are the fancy names for Splenda, Equal, and Sweet and Low, food preservatives, and somebody help me out with this word. I butcher it every time. Salicylates. There we go. Salicylates, which are some foods contained naturally and which are also in some medications. So the FEINGOLD diet has not been studied exclusively in Parkinson's. It was originally developed to alleviate asthma and eczema, and then later it became a recommendation for children with ADHD. There has been a link between the consumption of artificial sweeteners and food colorings with ADD, or attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Intermittent fasting. This is another one that tends to be pretty popular recently, where sometimes people will eat for a day, not eat the next, or they'll fast for 18 hours and leave themselves a 6-hour window, so on and so forth. It does not specify which foods you should eat, but rather when you should eat them. Again, those were the several strategies exist to accomplish an intermittent fast, and those are listed below, as I had already mentioned. So what is the research saying? Research does not support the claim linking intermittent fasting with a reduction in Parkinson's disease symptoms. Not only that, organizations do not recommend intermittent fasting for those with Parkinson's disease because of this vulnerable population who already might be dealing with a loss of appetite or difficulty getting proper nutrition to begin with. It also may be risky for those with Parkinson's who may be dealing with low blood pressure, dehydration, and poor balance. So here's the big slide, my big takeaway message that a lot of people who take carbidopa-levodopa do not know, is that your carbidopa-levodopa and protein interact. And when that happens, protein will always win because it is competing for the same receptor. So it does only happen in some cases. About 70% of people do not experience this. However, that 30% is enough for me to make this a point. Symptoms may not be controlled as effectively as well if carbidopa, levodopa is taken on an empty stomach rather than with food with high protein. Which brings me to my point. If that is something, I think that some of the recommendations might be 30-minute windows, so 30 minutes before you eat, 30 minutes after you eat, you wait, and then you take your medicine. Sometimes it's an hour. Sometimes that can get really tricky if you're taking a copious amount of medication throughout the day. So what we tend to tell people is to try a protein redistribution diet. So what that looks like is, let's say somebody is still working a 9-to-5 job, and they really need to maximize their on time in the morning, okay? So we want to make sure that we are pushing our protein towards the evening. So with dinner, we're probably going to have that steak or whatever looks like. We're not changing the actual amount of protein that we're getting in a day. So 50 grams of protein is the recommended, or I think it's 54 for men and women above the age of 65 and older. So we're not reducing the 50. We're just redistributing it to a different time in the day. Similarly, if you have trouble sleeping at night and you really need to maximize your carbidopa, levodopa at night, we're going to try to push most of our protein intake towards the beginning of the day. Does that make sense? Okay. So it's not considered a low protein diet, but rather just a shift in your dietary protein needs towards one end of the spectrum. Again, the amount of protein consumed is the same. So in conclusion, our understanding of the impact of nutrients in Parkinson's disease is still in its infancy. Because of these limitations, physicians usually limit their dietary recommendations to eat a well-balanced diet that includes increased fiber to prevent constipation, as well as fluid consumption to prevent dehydration. It is really important that one size does not fit all. Genetics does play a role. And the last thing that I'd like to tell people is it's kind of a fun experiment that I like to tell people to try. Is that I presented a whole bunch of different diets to you today. One of them or two of them might be of interest to you. And what I like to tell people is to start to keep a food diary. And not necessarily just keep a food diary of the things that you're eating, but the timing, as well as how you felt after eating that specific food. Because if you start to look at patterns, then you can know which foods make you feel better and which foods make you feel worse. Similarly, if you have concerns or nutritional concerns and you keep a food log, it's a lot easier to come into the doctor's office and explain the patterns of the eating that you're experiencing rather than just saying, my nutrition is off, what do I do? So the more information that you can provide your neurologist or your physicians, the better off you are. Does that make sense to everybody as well? Okay. Are there any questions? Because I actually think I have time for questions. Yeah? Okay. Any questions? Yes, in the back. Yes. Well, I think just in general, I can't really give you scientific data behind the genetics, but genetics meaning, I think in terms of, let's say, some people are allergic to other foods. That's one genetic component. I think another would be just that some people are predisposed to certain allergies, so that's one. Some people are predisposed to hypertension, so your needs are different based on what your genetic makeup looks like. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I noticed that Dean Matt walked in the room, so I want to give her an opportunity to quickly just say hello and welcome her, since this was in large part possible because of her.